All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to do lesson 4, quadratic formula. Before I do that, however, I want to remind you that you have access to a graphing calculator on Moodle. Go to the Moodle site, click on the calculator. Okay, up above are the directions if you forgot how to get to it. So any computer, you should be able to access the computer. I also want to point out that below the calculator we have MCA ACT review practice. You have all juniors have been enrolled in the class, so if you click on that, you will then be taken to this Moodle site where you have, again, the graphing calculator if you need it. You've got probability problems that you could review, practice. You've got some geometry here from Mr. Honig's. You've got some algebra and quadratics from Mr. Ronchek. You've got box and whisker. There's always box and whisker on the, oops, that took me back. Hold on. There's always box and whisker problems on the MCA, ACT test possibly. Okay. And you've got some more geometry and volume, and then trig. There's usually 4 to 5 questions about trigonometry. So review those things. If you need help, any of the math teachers will gladly go over stuff with you. All right, so just a reminder about that. All right, here we go. We need to move on to the quadratic formula. Okay, you need to have this memorized for a mastery quiz. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, something else. Whenever you're going to use the quadratic formula, just like factoring, the equation must equal 0. The b squared minus 4ac, that is called the discriminant. Okay, you may see that on the ACT test. It may say, or the MCA test. Okay, it just might ask you, what is the discriminant of this problem? Okay, well, the b squared minus 4ac, that is the discriminant. So what does it mean? What does it tell us? If you take the b squared minus 4ac and the number is bigger than 0, that tells us there are 2 real solutions. Okay, in other words, there are 2 x-intercepts. If the b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, in other words, it's negative, then there are 2 non-real solutions. Those are called imaginary. That means there are no, let me write no instead of 0, there are no x-intercepts. It does not cross the x-axis. And then b squared minus 4ac equals 0. If it equals 0, there is 1 real solution. That means there's 1 x-intercept. All right, I'm going to do 4 of the 6 problems on here. The other 2 problems you need to do along with the assignment. Here we go. So the first problem is this first one. So in order to use the quadratic formula, we must set it equal to 0. So we must first add 32. All right, so now our equation is x squared plus 15x plus 56 equals 0. The next thing we need to do is identify a, b, and c. Okay, remember the a is the number in front of x squared, which is a 1. The b is the number in front of x, that's a positive 15, and the c is a positive 56. The next step, plug the numbers into the formula. If you can't plug them in right, there's no way you're going to get the answer. All right, so here we go. X equals negative. Anytime you replace the letter, please use parentheses. So negative b, so that would be 15 inside, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 15 squared, again, use parentheses, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 56. All over 2 times a, which is 1. Again, use parentheses around all substitutions. Otherwise, your chances of making a mistake go up. Now, when you do this, we are only going to type in the discriminant. Only the discriminant. Okay, I'm going to highlight the discriminant in green. So we're going to start off typing this part into the calculator. Only that part. We are not going to use the square root. Here we go. Parentheses, 15 squared minus 4 times 1 times 56. Okay, we get a 1. All of that turned into a 1. So go back and let's rewrite this. So now we've got x equals, now this is where parentheses can disappear. So this is just negative 15 plus or minus the square root of 1 all over 2 times 1 is 2. Now, this discriminant, which is a 1, let me put that back in green. That tells us, if we go back up here, that's the first one right here. So it's bigger than 0. That's telling us there are 2 answers. There are 2 real solutions. All right, so let's go back and finish it because we're not done. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the square root of 1. Hopefully you can do that one in your head. The square root of 1 is 1. Okay, so here are the 2 answers. The first answer is x equals negative 15 plus 1 divided by 2. The other answer is negative 15 minus 1 divided by 2. Now, be careful. If you're going to type that into the calculator all at once, you do need to put grouping symbols around the numerator. If you do it in 2 parts, you don't need the grouping symbols. So, one answer is negative 7. The other answer is negative 8. Again, at any time, if I went too fast, pause, rewind, okay, do whatever you need to do so that you understand it. Okay, I'm going to do 3 more. The next one is the one underneath. All right, so again, we need to set this equal to 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So I've got 8x squared minus 8x. Now that 2 did not have anything to add to it, so that's just going to go behind all of that, and it equals 0. Okay, a is 8, b is negative 8. Watch your signs. C is 2. All right, time to plug it in. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Now again, if this is one of the cases, if you did not use parentheses, you would get it wrong. Always use parentheses on substitution. All right, so now I'm going to take just the discriminant, and I'm going to type that into the calculator. So I'm going to get what the discriminant is. All right, so negative 8 squared minus 4 times 8 times 2. Excellent. I got 0. So I'm going to rewrite this. X equals, now again I can get rid of parentheses. 2 negatives make a positive 8. Plus or minus the square root of 0 all over 16. So the 0 is my discriminant. So if I go back and look, that tells me right here that there is, whoops, wrong one. Okay, one underneath it. This one down here, it equals 0. That tells me there's one solution. That means one x-intercept. All right, so let's figure out what that is. So I know that the square root of 0 is 0. So x equals 8 over 16, because I don't need the plus or minus 0. That doesn't mean anything. That reduces to 1/2. Okay, and it's okay sometimes to have a decimal, which we'll see on our next example. So the decimal is 0.5. All right, two more. Here we go. The next one we'll do is right next to it. Now, in this problem, we've got a negative 3x squared. We never want an x squared, a negative x squared. So we're going to move that one instead of the 6x minus 10. So we're going to add 3x squared to both sides. So when I add it to both sides, I have 3x squared plus 6x minus 10 equals 0. All right, so there my A is 3, my B is 6, and my C is negative 10. All right, here we go. We're going to plug them in. Okay, to save time, I'm just going to go right to writing it out with the discriminant already figured out. Okay, you should get 156. Now, 156 is not a perfect square. So when and it's positive, there's two answers. 156 was positive, so that's telling me there are two real solutions. So, and if I take the square root of 156, I'm going to round it to one decimal place. So I'm going to use 12.5. All right, now my two answers. One answer is x equals negative 6 plus 12.5 divided by 6. And the other answer is negative 6 minus 12.5 divided by 6. Again, if you're going to type it in all at once, you do need to put grouping symbols around it. All right, so one answer, and I'm going to round to two decimal places now. One answer, this answer is 1.08. And this answer is negative 3.08. All right, one more. So I have to show you in this next example what happens if we end up with a negative discriminant. All right, so turn the page. We're going to go to the last problem. Okay, so the last problem, it's already equal to 0. So A is 6, B is 4, and C is 11. All right, here we go. Plug it in. Again, if I'm going too fast, just pause. Now, when I figure this one out and I plug in the discriminant, again, type only the discriminant into your calculator. We get negative 248. Now, you were taught very early on that you cannot take the square root of a negative. So if you try that on the calculator, you are going to get an error message. It's going to say a non-real answer. That's because this is what we call an imaginary solution. Okay? Okay, there is no x-intercept on this one. It does not cross the x-axis. Now, there is a way to simplify this. Unfortunately, that is something that'll have to be done at a later time. Usually in this data class, we don't get to it, but it is something that you should be taught. So if you want me to teach that to you, please see me after school, before school, and I'll show you what to do. Whenever we see a negative inside the square root, it's an imaginary number. The letter I is used for imaginary. There is actually an I on your calculator. If you look down at the decimal, there's the letter I. Okay? So you can do imaginary numbers on the calculator. So if you want to learn more about that before the ACT test or MCA test, please come see me. All right? So that is the lesson on the quadratic formula. Finish the rest of the packet and be ready for the test and mastery quiz.